teachings of Rabbi Ephraim Sprecher, Dean of Students at Diaspora Yeshiva on Mount Zion, Jerusalem.
Okay, good afternoon. Why did God decree that the Jewish people should be slaves in Egypt? What sin did we commit to cause us to be slaves in Egypt? When God told Abraham that your children will be enslaved, Abraham did not protest. When God told him about the decree against Sodom and Amorah, Abraham did protest. But when God told him the evil decree that the Jewish people must be enslaved, Abraham doesn't say boo. He doesn't protest at all. And there could be no sin. There was no people yet to sin. God just tells him your children will be enslaved and afflicted. And yet Abraham does not protest, whereas for Sodom and Amorah, he does protest. God, you can't do that to Sodom and Amorah. So you should have said the same thing about the Jewish people being enslaved in Egypt. Yet he does not protest as he does for Sodom and Amorah. Why not? Because Pesach is the holiday freedom to be slaves. The whole purpose of the Exodus, the Torah tells us at the end of Parshas Behar, Kili b'nei Yisrael avadim. The Jewish people are my avadim, are my slaves. Avodayhem. They are my servants. Asher hotzesi osam eretz Mitzrayim, that I took them out from the land of Egypt. So the reason Abraham did not protest when God told him about the decree that the Jewish people will have to be enslaved is because it wasn't a punishment. In order to be a slave to Hashem, you have to go to a slave school. And what's the Columbia University of slave school? It's Egypt. The whole reason God put us there in Egypt is to learn how to obey a master. The Torah says clearly, as we just quoted, the Jewish people are my slaves. Avodayhem. The whole reason that I put them in Egypt was to train them. Egypt was basic training to learn how to be an Evet Hashem, to learn how to take orders. And once they've learned that, now they can graduate to be an Evet Hashem. But first you have to go to the school of hard knocks, which is Mitzrayim. And there you learn how to take orders, and from there you can graduate from Avodayhem to become my servants, Hashem says. That's the whole reason that I took them out of the land of Egypt, as it says in Sof Parshas Behar. You know, Paro seems to be one of the stars of the Torah. It's amazing. There's a Paro in Abraham's time. There's a Paro in Yosef's time. And of course, there's a Paro in Moshe Rabbeinu's time, the Paro of the Exodus. Why does the Torah spend so many verses about Paro? You know, Paro is the classic villain. The Ramchal tells us that the word Paro comes from upora, to let loose. Paro is the classic villain. It teaches us how the Yetzer Hara works. How the Yetzer Hara works is Paro. Keep them busy. Paro, he says, that the Jewish people must be kept busy, to have no time to think about freedom, no time to think about God. That's the classic Yetzer Hara trick, says the Ramchal. So therefore the Torah spends so much psukim describing Paro, because describing Paro is a technique of the Yetzer Hara. Be busy with everything except Avodas Hashem. So today we don't have any physical slavery, but we have a different type of slavery. We have Facebook slavery or smartphone addiction, obsession. Pesach is the time to liberate ourselves from digital slavery and give us the skills we need for our personal freedom from texting and WhatsApp and all those high-tech gadgets. That's the Yetzer Hara's technique. Paro says, keep them busy. They should have no time to think about why we're here and where we're going. And we have that today. We're so crammed with these high-tech inventions that we don't have time to think about why we're here and where we're going. So don't fall for the Paro technique, where you're so busy you can't stop and think, why am I here and am I headed in the right direction or not? To detach ourselves from the smartphone or Facebook addiction. The Pesach Seder is coming up sooner than we think. The number 4 seems to have a very important place in the Pesach Seder. We have 4 questions. We have 4 sons. We have 4 Rishonim Shel Geula, 4 terms of redemption. And of course, one of the major features we will be enjoying is the drinking of the 4 cups of wine. Why does everything revolve around 4 at the Pesach Seder? The Talmud tells us that the Exodus happened because of the Noshim Tzidkaniot. The righteous women caused the Exodus. It wasn't on account of Moshe, it wasn't on account of Aaron. It was the righteous Jewish women who never lost their hope and faith in God. When the men wanted to throw in the towel and stop having children, the women forced them to live with them and be able to have Jewish children, even in the darkest time of our history in Egypt, when babies were being thrown into the Nile River. The righteous women had more faith than the men, never to give up hope. Despite the evil decree of Paro, they insisted on having children. So therefore, the number 4 is so an important part at the Seder, Exodus night, because the 4 represents the 4 mothers, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. The 4 mothers, they are the heroes, and they are the prototypes. They are the shining example that the righteous Jewish women followed in Egypt. So therefore, the number 4, representing the 4 mothers of Israel, who were emulated by the righteous Jewish women in Egypt that caused the redemption. Only in their merit. So therefore, everything in the Seder revolves around the number 4 to give credit to the righteous Jewish women, which are represented by the 4 mothers of Israel. Now, one of the 4 that revolves around is the 4 cups of wine. The Mishnah is very specific about the 4 cups of wine, requiring the community to see to it that even the poor have 4 cups of wine, even if it comes from public charity. The Mishnah tells us in Sprecher chapter 10. Now, since the Torah says nothing whatsoever about wine in describing the Pesach Seder, the question arises as to the origin and meaning of this practice. Why wine at all at the Pesach Seder? And we said 4 cups representing the 4 terms of redemption, representing the 4 mothers of Israel. But why wine? To begin with, wine does appear in the Torah in ritual context. Wine was used as libations on the altar and was considered a special drink that caused people to rejoice. As we read in Tehillim, chapter 104, and wine makes the heart of man joyful. Therefore, it was taken over from the temple right into the shul and the home, so that Kiddush is recited over it, and Havdalah, and Birchat HaMazon. Weddings are also done with wine, Sheva Brachas, and it's the ceremony, the Brit Milah, because King David says in Tehillim 104, and wine makes the heart of a person joyful. It would only have been natural then for the festive Pesach meal, the Seder, like any holiday meal, to begin with wine and conclude with it. It would also have been usual for another cup to be drunk with the meal. However, at the Seder, this might have its origins in the fact that wine was served during any festive meal specifically to make the family rejoice, as the Tosefta Pesachim tells us. At the Seder, this 3rd cup of wine was associated with the telling of the Haggadah, the telling of the story. And the fourth cup of wine is recited over the Hallel, and is a special edition unique to the Seder. So as we said before, different explanations are offered in the writings of the sages as to the significance of the number 4. It represents the 4 mothers of Israel. It represents 4 expressions of redemption, 4 empires that oppressed Israel, 4 cups of punishment for those empires, 4 cups mentioned in connection with Paroi in his dream, when he had a dream and Yosef interpreted it, 4 cups of fury, 4 cups of salvation, 4 decrees of Paroi against Israel, and also the 4 exiles. But the most popular and most accepted reason for the 4 cups is that the 4 cups stand for the 4 promises of redemption that God told the Jewish people. And I quote, this is a quote from Shemot 6, I will free you from the labors of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from their bondage, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and through extraordinary punishments for the Egyptians, and I will take you to be my people. The Hebrew words are V'otzeisi, V'hatzalti, V'galti, V'lakachti. V'otzeisi, I will take you out. V'hatzalti, I will rescue you. Hatzalah. V'galti, I will redeem you. V'lakachti, and I'll take you to be my people. Once these 4 promises of redemption had been accepted as the main reason for the 4 cups of wine, the question arose about the fact that there was a 5th expression of redemption in Shemot 6. What about the 5th expression of redemption? Where God says, and I shall bring you to the land that I swore to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. The Heveti. So shouldn't there be a 5th cup of wine? Because there's actually not 4 languages of redemption, but there's actually 5. V'otzeiti, V'hitzalti, V'galti, V'lakachti, V'heveti. And I will bring you to the land of your forefathers. So what about the 5th cup for the 5th redemption? Where is that? Therefore, the Talmud tells us, Rabbi Tarfon taught, on the 5th cup of wine, one finishes the Hallel and says the great Hallel, Psalm 136. This is found in the Yishalmi Pesachim, not in the Babli, but in Yishalmi Pesachim, where Rabbi Tarfon says there actually is a 5th cup for the Heveti Eschem, and I will bring you to the land of your forefathers. It's Yishalmi Pesachim 10, and it's also in the manuscript reading of Pesachim, page 118. Where Rabbi Tarfon says you should actually drink the 5th cup because there's 5 expressions of redemption, not 4. This is also probably the origin of the cup of Eliyahu, because not all sages were agreed that we should drink the 5th cup. Therefore, it was set aside until Eliyahu would come and decide the issue and other halachic matters, whether the 5th cup should be drunk or not. So therefore it's called the Kos of Eliyahu, because the other sages did not agree with Rabbi Tarfon. They said you should only drink 4 cups of wine. So therefore we set the 5th cup aside for the cup of Eliyahu. When Eliyahu comes, he will decide the issue whether we should drink the 5th cup or not. It may be that the majority of the sages did not agree with Rabbi Tarfon, because that promise of redemption was painfully unfulfilled after the exile, after the Chorban Bayit Sheni. The Jews went into exile, a terrible exile in Rome. That may also explain why in the verses explained in the Haggadah, the following verse, he brought us to this place and gave us this land, is absent. That pasuk in Devarim, God brought us to this place and gave us this land, is absent. Because the Haggadah was written after the Chorban Bayit Sheni, when the Jews were no longer in the land of Israel. The Jews were exiled in a bitter exile to Rome. However, both of Amram Gaon and the Rambam do mention using the fifth cup, although they see it as optional but not required. Rabbi Menachem Kasher, in his edition of the Haggadah, strongly advocates the drinking of the fifth cup. The cup of Elio can be passed to all the participants at the Seder as the fifth cup. Rabbi Kasher believes that we have been privileged to live in a time when the fifth expression of redemption has actually come to pass, and the Jewish people has returned to its own land after 1950 years and established the wonderful state of Israel. Therefore, according to Rabbi Kasher, in his Haggadah, it is right and proper that we drink a fifth cup of wine at the Seder to recognize that reality and express our gratitude and thanksgiving to God for the wonderful state of Israel. Just 3 years after the Holocaust, we come and build this wonderful state of Israel. Nobody comes back after 1950 years and resurrects a dead language, Hebrew. Comes back? Who comes back after a third of our people were massacred in the Holocaust? After 1950 years in exile, we come back and rebuild this wonderful land of Israel? That alone should inspire us to drink the fifth cup, according to Rav Kasher in his edition of the Haggadah. Considering the fact that so great a sage as Rabbi Tarfon advocated the drinking of the fifth cup of wine, and that such great authorities as the Rambam and Rav Amram Goen permitted drinking the fifth cup, it would seem that not to drink the fifth cup would be an act of ingratitude to God for the partial redemption represented by the state of Israel. We are on the way to redemption that has come about in our time. How many cups does it take to express our gratitude, HaKol Satov to Baruch at the Seder? I believe that the answer is 5. So if you're not shikar yet, after the 4 cups of wine, perhaps we should drink the 5th cup, thereby expressing our gratitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for bringing us back to the land of Israel after 1950 years. Thank you, and have a wonderful afternoon.
For more of Rabbi Sprecher's teachings, visit rabbisprecher.com.